Now to the latest on the coronavirus. The death toll from the virus has now hit 304 globally, and more than 14,000 people around the world have become infected with the virus, 12 in Australia. The Prime Minister, as you know, has announced a ban on all flights coming in from China, unless you're an Australian citizen, at which point you'll need to spend 2 weeks in quarantine on Christmas Island. The ban on flights, I think, is a sensible move that we called for on the show last week, if you were watching, because, of course, the incubation period for the virus is up to 14 days. The ban on flights from China is essential to contain the virus that's expected to become even more deadly as it mutates and spreads. But while this is so important from a public health perspective, we've also got to be aware of just how disruptive this ban on all Chinese visitors coming to Australia is going to be for our economy. The impact can't be underestimated. In terms of tourism alone, Chinese visitors account for 15% of the total inbound tourism market, worth around $12 billion a year. And it's not just tourism, but overseas students as well. The federal government and the Education Minister, Dan Tehan, is asking universities to delay their start date of the academic year or provide more courses online until the flight ban lifts. Then there's the hit to business. Cargo may also have to reroute because ships can't be staffed by employees who have been working in China. I mean, that is just enormous disruption. Coupled with the impact of the bushfires, at this point, unless Josh Frydenberg somehow pulls a rabbit out of the hat, and we can't put it past him, but I think that at this point we can no longer expect a surplus when the budget is handed down in May. That's just the reality. Can you imagine Australia trying to respond to the coronavirus and the recovery effort from the bushfires had our budget still been in a $50 billion deficit? Or had the federal election result gone the other way and there'd been so many new spending measures? It would have been impossible. It now seems that the government certainly made the right decision not to cave into pressure last year to bring forward tax relief following the advice from the RBA, IMF and Labor. That advice now seems very ill-informed. Now, for more on the latest with the deadly coronavirus, we'll cross live to CNN's David Culver in Beijing. David, the governments in not just Australia but several countries now have closed off the borders to Chinese flights. How has the Chinese government reacted to this news?
You're right. It's not just Australia. In fact, Sharri, we're hearing today that New Zealand's following suit and the U.S. is implementing a similar measure where essentially they are saying that anyone who is either coming from or transiting through mainland China cannot enter for that stretch of period, at least 14 days. And they say if you are a citizen of those countries, you can come in, but you're going to have to be in quarantine, either self-quarantine or in some cases mandatory quarantine if you've been in Hubei province in particular. So how the government here is reacting is one of, well, they're pushing forward one message in particular, and that's the World Health Organization message, because the World Health Organization has quite frankly suggested that countries not issue trade and travel restrictions against China. And they have said that China, in their words, has done a positive job with their effort to contain the spread of this virus. But it's also growing. I mean, it seems the global community is really not responding to what the WHO is saying, and they're implementing their own measures out of what they perceive to be their own safety. And there are some 62 countries, according to the foreign ministry here, that have imposed some sort of immigration restriction on Chinese nationals in particular. Now, we do know that there are efforts to step up containment here, especially when it comes to treating those infected. In fact, just today, they finished construction of the first of 2 hospitals. Took about a week's time to build. They mobilized quickly. This is opening in Wuhan. Tomorrow, it'll start to see patients, about 1,000 expected to be treated there. And then a few days later, they're going to be opening up a second hospital that will hold another 1,600 patients. But overall, it seems the influx of those impacted is increasing. And one thing that was mentioned today by the premier here, Li Keqiang, is that they're concerned about the production of face masks and protective equipment, medical equipment that is badly needed. We've been talking to the nurses and doctors who are on the front lines, and Sharri, they're very honest about saying they are not getting the supplies. So while it may be coming to some of the outskirts, there's something with the distribution that's not getting all the way to them, and they need that. And that's been something that Premier Li has acknowledged as well in saying that the factories need to step up production and need to push forward. I mean, he's likening this to a war. He's saying that we need to build up our arsenal, speaking on behalf of China, and go at battle against this epidemic. One other thing he did mention today, Sharri, that was quite interesting had to do with food supply. And he warned that getting daily necessities here may become increasingly challenging. And he suggested that local jurisdictions in particular work to ensure those food supply chains. And the reason he's suggesting that is we have seen images, particularly on social media, of small towns actually walling off, essentially, building mounds on roads so that cars cannot come in, their way of essentially quarantining their own towns, Sherry.
David Cove, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for the update. And it seems like this virus has got a long way to go, and we haven't yet seen either the health or the economic impact of it.